The following program is brought to you in part by the film Backdoor Channels, The Price of Peace.
Welcome to another Leon Charney Report. We have a really eclectic and exciting show tonight.
Briefly, I was born in Jerusalem, on Mount Scopus, a few years before the Israeli independence. And my father came from Iran long ago, in 1920. My mother came around the same time from Yugoslavia, Macedonia. And I, together with my two brothers and three sisters, were born in Jerusalem. I grew up in Jerusalem. I joined the Air Force after high school when I was 18 years old. July 64, I got my wing. And right after, with almost no time, we started, to operate almost on a weekly basis, and later on a daily basis during the War of Attrition. So I participated in all the wars, 67, War of Attrition, 73, 82, and in between, like maybe 300 operational sorties. In 94, I became a Major General. In 96, I became the Chief Commander of the Israeli Air Force. I retired in 2000, and since then, I do different things. Part of it is business, and part of it is as much as I can to contribute to the Jewish people and to the Israeli society. This is why I'm involved in Beit HaTfutzot. Well, Beit HaTfutzot is the center where we present, first of all, the history, the heritage, the achievements of the Jewish people around the world. And I think that the combination of what the Jews are today, what are the roots and the heritage of the Jewish people, and what is the history of the Jewish people, which is part of my life and my family, made me inspired and proud to help and to support and to do as much as I can to promote this institute. I believe that it is today, and it will be more and more in the future, a center where we will be able to connect with every single Jewish community around the world. And every single Jewish community around the world will send their families, their children to visit and to be acquainted with Beit HaTfutzot, with everything that we collect and we have there. We have a huge collection of database covering almost everything which is related to the Jewish people. We have a wonderful, and now we are building the new wonderful permanent exhibition. And every year we have temporary exhibition which shows and tell the story of every single Jewish community around the world. And other things which are related to the Jewish achievements, like art, technology, and everything. This should be and will be, and this is why I'm part of it, the center of the Jewish people around the world. In the early 70s, the Iranians, in the days of the Shah, the relations between the Iranians and the United States, as well as between the Iranians and Israel, were flourishing. And they used to fly the same airplane that we flew, the Phantoms, the American F-4 Phantoms. They were able, and they could afford buying a simulator when they buy the airplane, which we couldn't do the same. We bought the airplane, but we did not have the money to buy simulators. So as part of the good relations between Israel and Iran, which were not revealed to the public, but it was, very strong relations under the table. As part of it, we used to send Israeli young pilots to Tehran to train and to use their simulator for training. And I was lucky to be one of these delegations. So I went there. This was back in 1971. I went there for 10 days. We did the training. We saw Tehran. We even traveled a little bit around. They took us to Isfahan, which is a very nice and interesting city. So this was, for me, it was kind of experience to see in my own eyes the roots of my family. This was my part of my relations. But what I would like to add, to this conversation, everybody knows that the Middle East is going through a turmoil recently, and things are being changed. And if you try to look at it from the political and military perspective, then you find that it is a bit difficult to determine the threat today comparing to what we had 20 years ago. We knew that exactly where is the border. Here is Assad, here is Mubarak, and we knew exactly who against who. Under the new circumstances in the Middle East, everything has been changed. You do know that the threat is there, and the threat can get shaped in a different ways. This is why you have to be, first of all, strong. People needs to stay patriotic. We need to be versatile in order and smart enough and to react very fast when the threat comes out, and to understand and to know exactly in which way we should respond to that. I would say that this is kind of a challenge that we did not have before. This is very important today regarding the total picture, not only the agreement which is undertaken right now between the Iranians and the Americans. Well, it seems like at this moment this is a done deal. I think that from this point and on, there is no way to go back. I expect a few changes, a few improvements in this agreement regarding the details, but I believe that at the end of the day, an agreement will be signed. Things should have been done differently, but this was true like 3, 4, 5 years ago when we got, into the crisis. But where we are today, I see no alternative. And I think and I believe, the Iranian peoples are very smart. This is a very old country. They have a history of 3,000 years. It's not just a temporary state like Syria, for instance. They are not like Saudi Arabia. They have a long heritage, a long experience. It goes generations and the generation backwards, and they know what they are doing. Unfortunately, their rationale and their interests do not match the Western world, but when they decide and they know what they want to do, they know very well how to do it. And then when it comes to these days, I think that the sanction work relatively good. As I mentioned, I think that it should have been done differently, but at least this part of the strategy, which is to be able to form a coalition, and the coalition put sanction on Iran, and it should have taken long enough in order that the people will feel it. Then we came to a point where they were ready to negotiate. When I say that I think that it should have been done differently, I mean that instead of using the strategy like line astern, which means you try to negotiate or you try by diplomacy to convince them to terminate the program. If this doesn't work, then you put sanction. If this doesn't work, you put more sanctions. And then if this doesn't work, then you bring to the table the military option. In my opinion, it should have been done in different way, just to put everything together. I mean, you put the military pressure seriously, and you show that you really mean it, even by practicing some steps towards, a military operation. And after this, and under this pressure, you start to negotiate. But if you leave it for later on, it doesn't help enough. But now it is too late. I mean, under the current circumstances, probably this is the only alternative to try and reach the best agreement. There are still some correction that can be done, and I believe that the pressure from the Congress and the Senate and all the decisions that was made in the Capitol Hill recently will help to polish the agreement a little bit before they sign it. But then once they sign it, I call it the day after. We have to think about the day after, which means it will be a new reality. It will be a new world. Sanction will remove, maybe if not at one step, but step by step. Practically speaking, they will remove it. And new relations between Iran and European and the Western world, not only the Western, even the Eastern world, will open up. Now the question will be, either they really decided that it is better for them not to renew the program because they will stay at a threshold, which means anyhow for them to resume the program and to reach a nuclear weapon will be a short time. It doesn't matter if this is 3 months, 4 months, or 1 year. Practically this is a short time because they have all the infrastructure. They have all the building blocks in order to get there. The only thing which is still open is what do they have deep in their mind? Will they feel that they can flourish and at the same time to remain strong in Iran and to remain strong and to keep their hegemony in the region? I think that they will delay the program as much as possible. But if they feel that they don't need it, then probably they change their mind. And if they want, it doesn't matter what are the details in the agreement. If they really want to resume the program, they will find a way to do that. So in the day after, what we have to do is try to make sure that they remove it from their interest and their goals. If we trust the Iranians, the answer is no. And it doesn't matter if we should or not. We have to assume that we should not trust them. This is why part of the agreement should be that we insist of full freedom to the inspectors to go anywhere, everywhere, anytime, to make sure that they keep and they follow the agreement. Speaking of coalition, it is very important that the rest of the world will be together. And I think the toughest or the most difficult challenge the American administration have is to conduct this process, either military attack or agreement, diplomatic agreement. It is relevant not only to Israel, to anyone, even to the American. If you decide to do that, you need to make sure that you are backed by international coalition to back you. just to ignore the rest of the world and to go and do that, like a commando mission, like what we've done in Iraq or what was done in Syria, is not right. Because this is a very wide operation. It might take longer. And when an operation takes long and afterwards you have to sit down and to discuss with your enemy, you need to make sure that you are backed by international coalition. So if you're asking me if we can be part of this kind of operation together with the American and the European, the answer is absolutely yes. But no country should go alone and ignore the rest of the coalition.
Hi, I'm Leon Charney, and this is the Leon Charney Report. So what do? We bring on a general from the Israeli Air Force in uniform, Brigadier General Eitan Ben Eliyahu, who's one of the flying aces of the Israeli Air Force, which is allegedly the best Air Force in the world. Don't get angry at me with the U.S. Air Force, but that's what they say. By the way, Eitan, welcome.
Welcome.
There were 2 books written on the Israeli Air Force recently, aside from Ezer Weitzman's book on Eagle's Wings. One was called Margin of Error, and the other one was, I forgot the name, it was written by Cheetah, who was a colonel in the Air Force. Have you read those books?
Yes, I read 2 of them.
Both books say that the Israeli Air Force is the greatest thing that was created since frozen yogurt. Is that true?
Well, I think it's true.
Why?
Because, well, at least there we have evidence. I mean, in the last 48 years, we have shot down, for instance, close to 700 enemy airplanes. We had a...
With the engines?
Yes, with the engines.
Oh my God.
In the air.
In the air.
And we destroyed on the ground about the same number. In Six-Day War, we destroyed on the ground 400 airplanes within 4 hours, which was a big victory. We took the weight of all responsibilities for the war of attritions, and the same in '73 war. So the Israeli Air Force is really one of the best, or maybe the best Air Force in the world.
All right, we won't argue with you. We'll accept it. A man named Herzl Bodinger, you know him?
Of course I know him. He's my commander.
He's your commander. I saw him schlepping down Arava with a bunch of generals where they signed a peace treaty with Jordan, and he was shaking hands with his counterpart, the head of the Royal Jordanian Air Force. Were you, first of all, at this signing, or did you see it?
Yeah, I saw it on TV. I wasn't there.
How did you feel seeing your commander-in-chief shaking hands with the Jordanian chief of the Air Force?
Well, this was a very, very good feeling. I mean, after so many years, we used to meet them in the air. We used to patrol on our side, they are on their side. We have engaged on the air from time to time. But here comes the day that the 2 generals meet together and they shake hands, which is wonderful. By the way, we have always considered the Jordanian Air Force as a very good Air Force.
Is that right?
Yes, they are
What planes do they
very
have?
good.
The F-15s?
No, they
F-16s?
don't have F-15s, they don't have F-16s, but
Russians?
they have F-5s. They have F-5.
What's the difference between an F-5 and F-15? Speed?
Well, F-15 is much more advanced, better maneuverable.
Maneuverability.
Better maneuverability.
I can't fly planes. You
Yeah,
can't
yes,
talk,
but
so
I can.
either.
Yes.
You
Well,
know.
that's yeah.
It's
We
far.
are even. That's
We'll get
okay.
there.
Yes. And well, it has everything. Almost everything is better. Highest payload, better payload. I mean, better avionics systems. Can go longer range.
But we don't hear much in the history of war between Israel. We don't see much about Jordanian air fights. Mostly, you read about the Egyptian air fights and the Syrians, where you've had a lot of air fights.
We had more with the Syrians and the Egyptians, but yet we did have some with the Jordanians. In '67, before '67, we had some engagement. But as I say, we were watching them flying all these years, and I can tell you that they fly very, very good.
A friend of yours named Ezer Weitzman, who's the president of Israel, told me that you're an ace fighter pilot, and he himself was a fighter pilot. What makes a great fighter pilot?
Skills, number 1.
Sounds like a lawyer. Go ahead.
Motivation.
Lawyer.
Number two. And a lot of work.
Guts?
Of course. I mean, that's...
All right, you've been the head of squadrons. You've flown F-15s, F-16s. You probably
yes, I flew all.
everything.
Actually, I flew all of them. Yes, I was the commander of an F.
The washouts in the Israeli Air Force are very traumatic. A lot of people used to, I don't know if it's still true today, wanted to go to the Air Force, and in the end, the highlight of their life was to become a fighter pilot.
Right.
Okay, you are there. You're the deputy commander of the Israeli Air Force. You've been a fighter pilot. When you have to wash out a kid, do you feel any emotions about it, or you have to be very tough about it?
Well, both. On one hand, you have to be tough because we want to keep those guys who can be the best, who are able to be and capable to be the best fighter pilots. But on the other hand, you feel emotions, absolutely, especially when you have to wash them out in late in the course. The course lasts 2 years, and the guy, after he graduates, he has to train for another year, at least a year, before he becomes a qualified fighter pilot. During these 3 years, they have a good chance to be washed out. You get close to the guy, you happen to know him. They are mostly. These guys have a lot of motivation. They are willing to dedicate themselves for the profession, to fly in the Air Force. And yes, it is involved with emotions.
And I'd like to say something about Eitan because I know him a few years. There used to be a feeling in the Air Force that Sephardic Jews were not being elevated as quickly or were not as good pilots as the Ashkenazi pilots, and I think that Eitan is a mixture of both. Am I right, Eitan?
Yeah, more or less.
Was there any truth to that, by the way, in your opinion?
I don't think so.
No.
Not at all.
It's just quality.
It's just quality. It's just a matter of quality. You give the guys chance, and you train them, and everybody can do it. It depends on your own skills. Doesn't matter where you're coming from.
All right, your opinion. Why is the pilot in Israel so looked up to? Are they the defenders of Israel at the end of the day? I mean, you have great people in your army. You have Golani, you have paratroopers, you have Sayeret Matkal, which is the scouts for the chief of staff. Why is the Air Force so looked up upon?
Well,
why did you become a pilot? Let's go back to you.
Let me say first that you are right. All the other elite units.
Is that because it's my show?
That's because it's your show,
okay,
yes.
Good.
But all the elite are very good. I mean, they're all wonderful, wonderful people. And you look for the guys in Sayeret Matkal, you will see a brilliant, wonderful fighters.
We have people in Somalia who watch us. That's for the special commandos who work for the chief of staff.
Okay. And all over, actually. But the Air Force, you're right, it's something else. Well, it's more like it's more than being a soldier. It's a profession. This is a profession for life. Those pilots who leave the Air Force, they still serve as a reserve, and they are part of the family. You join the Air Force, you become a pilot, you dedicated yourself to that, you become addict. It's wonderful. You're not able to quit flying.
So you need a methadone clinic.
And then you become part of the family for at least 25 years, as long as you're flying. That's one thing. The other thing is that this is true, that a very, very strong and important part of the defense of Israel is on the shoulders of the Air Force. It is true, by all meaning. And on one part of it is the deterrence that we built with the Air Force against our enemies. The Air Force is big. The Air Force has good equipment. The Air Force has the best pilots, and all together makes it
a good machine,
strong, and very effective.
All right, how many planes have you down? You're sort of an ace in Israel.
Well, this is not to be
publicized.
This is not to be publicized.
You whisper to me
later after the show.
But they in Cheetah's book, he spoke about is it after a certain amount of years you can talk about it?
No, what you can do, you mention names, but
You can't say how many.
You can't say how many. I mean,
All right,
this
we
is
won't
something that
embarrass
we are not discussing.
All right,
now.
really-
I gave you the total number of the Air Force, which is good enough.
Yeah, but I want to know how you divide into it. I had a friend of yours who used to call me from Harvard all the time. His name was Ron Pecker.
Good old
But he
fighter
never told me
pilot.
how many planes he shot down.
See?
And then there's another friend of yours who's an automobile salesman now, since he's right? He's selling
Yeah.
cars now.
Yes,
right?
the guy is
But he
doing very
still
well.
flies
He's doing
planes,
very
right?
well, and he flies planes, and he's doing
You're still
very well.
flying, by the way, actively?
Myself?
Yeah.
Yes, of course. Not as much as I used to, but I do fly.
Eitan, the peace process, and I know you can't talk politics, you're here on an official mission to help the Friends of the Israeli Defense Force, but now that you have peace with Jordan and you have some kind of peace process with the Palestinians, do you have to reverse things in the army? You become a different type of unit now, or you're in the middle of trying to figure out what you're supposed to be doing?
Well, I'll tell you what, the Greens, the ground forces, may...
The Greens.
The Greens, right. They may have to change it a little bit. But it's interesting. Everybody's focusing today on the terror, you know, and the peace process and so and so. But as far as the Air Force is concerned, actually the balance of threats that we have to keep is still the same, even more weight on the Air Force, because you have to deal with threats coming from the outer circle,
Iran,
Iraq, Libya. Those are potential countries that they can be a threat with no time, using ballistic missiles, sending their forces to the border, and so and so. And the only force who can deal with it with no time is the Air Force. So, from this perception, I think that the Air Force is still have the same goals and the same mission to do.
I'm going to ask you a personal question, not about your personal life. He's available, by the way. He's not married. When Israel was scudded and you were in the Air Force, what was your emotional feeling?
Well, it was a mixed feeling. On one hand, I knew, not myself, we knew in the Air Force on a professional basis that the Scud, as long as it is not chemical.
How did you know it wasn't chemical?
Well, we didn't know. I mean, we didn't know.
That's
We
what
had to
scared
assume
me,
that it
and
might.
I'm serious now. It was what scared me. We broadcast here the night you were scudded, and I said that Shamir politically made a wrong move, in my opinion, because he allowed Israel to be at the scapegoat, so to speak, for the United States for one shot. And God forbid if there were chemicals on those Scuds, who knows what would have happened. So you were pretty lucky.
Well,
On the other hand, people were waiting for the Israeli Air Force to move and to take those Scuds out. Actually, it was a political decision. You guys couldn't do anything. But were you ready to go?
well, I can tell you that we were very, very, very ready to go at any moment.
Really?
Well, once we got an order, we could be there within no time. That's one thing. The other thing is that we considered those missiles to be contained with chemical warheads, but yet we knew that the chances are very low. It is more complicated, and the meaning of firing chemical warheads on Israel probably would be some very, very dramatic move. So we had to consider, and we did consider it, that it might be a chemical. But as long as it was not chemical, we knew from a professional point of view, that it was not such a big deal.
Where were you on the night of the Scuds?
I am in the command post.
Command post. Were you nervous?
Well, of course. I mean, ballistic
All right,
missile
okay.
is being fired on your own people,
Right.
back on the middle of Tel Aviv. Nobody can stay calm. I mean, we were upset. Definitely. And so this was a bad feeling, but we knew that we can overcome, as always.
All right, I know you've seen Syria from the air, as most Israeli pilots have. You think Syria is a potential peace partner within a year?
I hope so. I hope so, and I believe so. I don't know what the price will be or should be. This is not for me to decide. But I do think that potentially Syria, as Jordan, is a potential country for peace.
Well, Jordan is in there now. I think they'll work well. All right, Eitan, did you ever hear about the Altalena?
Of course.
We're going to do a show now about the Altalena, which, in my opinion, was most divisive part of the Israeli history that nearly divided the whole country. We have the widow of Avram Savsky here, Bronka Weintraub, and we have a lady who created a docudrama about the Altalena, Ilana Tsur. So stand by.
Interesting. I would love to see it.
You're going to be here. All right, Eitan, thanks a lot for
Thank
seeing
you
us.
very
See you
much.
when you're Chief of the Air Force.
I hope so.
בשבוע החמישי לקום המדינה, בעת ההפוגה הראשונה בקרבות, עלתה אלטלנה באש. המאבק סביב בואה לארץ, המחלוקת על גורל הנשק שהביאה, כמו גם סופה הטרגי, החריפו את הקיטוב בעם, כמעט גרמו למלחמת אחים.
You've just seen part of a film written, directed, produced by Ilana Tsur on Altalena, and we have with us the widow of Abraham Stavsky, who was killed on this ship. And Stavsky was wrongly accused of killing a man named Alozorov in 1932, who was a member, so to speak, of the labor faction of the Israeli government. He and Rosenblatt, who was the other one, Bronka? Achimeir, were falsely accused of killing Alozorov. This became a big issue in Israel. Ilana, welcome to the show. I mean, do you know anything in the history of Israel that so divided the country as this?
No, that's why I chose to make a documentary on it, and it was hushed up for many years.
Who hushed it up?
I don't know, I think it was like a Pandora box that nobody wanted to open up. And it's something that you have to invest a lot of time to compile all the material, or to go through the archive and everything. So I think people just postponed doing it until I decided it, and it took me 3 years.
All right, Bronka, we have living history with you. Your husband was Abe Stavsky, who was a very strong compatriot of Menachem Begin and Jabotinsky and the Irgun and the Lehi. Where were you, by the way, when Altalena was sailing?
I was in New York when Abrashka, with Peter Bergson, Merlin, decided to organize this Altalena because Begin wanted very much.
Wasn't it organized in France?
No, it was organized in our apartment on 25 Central Park West. They decided that Stavsky will go and buy a ship, look for a ship someplace. Cuba, Puerto Rico, I don't remember exactly when because they kept it secret and he didn't want himself to know. To make this story very obvious, when he came in excited, we bought a ship and we're going to say this, going to travel and sell potatoes. The ship arrived to New York. For a long time they were been checking possibility how to get to Marseille. Many of our friends from the Irgun work with the French government and decided that they will allow in Marseille Altalena to come, and from there the people will really bring all the Europeans who wanted to go to Palestine. Then it was about 16 days before the independence was announced. That
You know, I think I've been remiss in telling the audience why it's such an important subject. It was the first time, it was 3 weeks after the Israeli state was founded.
That's right.
The Altalena was coming in with refugees and ammunition, arms, and Ben Gurion gave an order to shoot at the Altalena with knowledge that Menachem Begin was on the ship.
He didn't know.
He did not know?
I don't think he knew.
Excuse
that,
me if I
Menachem Begin was there. But there was a dispute about how to divide the armament that came on shore. And that was the reason.
And one of the machers there was Yitzhak Rabin, now the present Prime Minister of Israel. He was head of one of the Almach or units, at that time it was the Israeli Defense Forces. Okay, so you had this terrific clash. You had Jews coming out of World War II, coming out of concentration camps, coming out of miserable situations. You had 900 and something on the ship. You had arms which could have come to Israel. And Ben Gurion makes this critical decision to hand over the ship and the armaments, otherwise he's going to blow you up. Did he give him enough warning, Ilana?
Well, I think, I don't know if it was enough, but I think that the problem was that he had to exercise his authority. He was afraid that there will be more than one army if the armament gets into the hands of the Irgun.
Was that realistic? I know what he thought. Was that realistic? Yeah. How could they fight and start an army with 400 men? I mean, they were so outnumbered. Go ahead.
May I just say that was a lot of arm. I know that here in New York there were people who was gladly giving arm for this cause, for the Irgun. They were afraid. Actually, the army in Altalena came with a dream to defend Jerusalem, which was in very difficult situation.
Did they want to start their own army?
No, they did not. They wanted together with Haganah.
Did he want to be?
Never.
Never.
He wanted always to go together with Haganah to fight for the independence.
Ilana, what does your research show?
My research shows that Jerusalem was promised 20% of the arms.
That's right.
Jerusalem Brigade, you mean?
No, in Jerusalem.
In Jerusalem.
Jerusalem was under...
The defenders of Jerusalem.
Defenders of Jerusalem. At that period, the Irgun was independent in Jerusalem. It wasn't part of the IDF, the Israeli Defense Forces. It's true that there was such a big amount of armament that I can understand why Ben Gurion was afraid that if it's not under his control, it might cause him problems in the future.
But
I must admit one thing, that I think that maybe the cannon was triggered too soon, and there could be another
The cannon
option.
is the direct hit.
Yeah.
That was done from...
yes, I think that
and that was ordered by Ben Gurion. But your film showed that there was an intermediary, a guy who was head of the Navy. I forgot his name. I used to know him. He said there were many other things that he could have done, like put tear gas in there, or all kinds of tricks. Why didn't Ben Gurion do that?
Well, I feel a little bit strange talking...
You're not defending him. Do you find any historical fact?
I think that it wasn't the ship that worried Ben Gurion. It was his authority.
But if you smoked out everybody and you took him in...
You don't do away with the problem. He wanted really to teach a lesson.
To show authority?
To show authority, because...
He was willing to risk casualties?
There was a problem. Many of the Irgun members heard about this problem and they left the frontier. I mean, you cannot run an army and defend your country against 7 Arab countries when you have to invest energy in an inner conflict.
He thought that he'd have a whole revolution in the army itself.
Yes,
that was his calculation.
Yes, like a surgeon, to cut.
מאותו רגע שנשמעה הירייה, פרצו, כולם ירו, מי שהיה לו כלי נשק ירה, לכל הכיוונים, היה משהו נוראי. והתחילו לפגוע כדורים אצלנו, והתחיל קרב רציני ביותר.
היה שם קרב ממושך, של שעה עד שעה וחצי. אנחנו היינו מוקפים בעמדות קדימה ומהאגף. עם מפקד האצ"ל והאגף הגעתי להסכם שאנחנו לא נראה אחד על השני, כי באמת שם יכול להיות טבח הדדי. והקרב היה בעיקר כלפי החלק שפונה אל הים. זו הייתה לחימת מטווח די קרוב, והייתה תחושה של פוטש צבאי. תחושה, אם זה היה כך או לא, אני לא יכול לשפוט. אני יכול להגיד לו, זה היה אחד האירועים הכי קשים שאני זוכר.
Ilana, in your film, you interviewed many Israeli Defense Force soldiers at that time who said in the film that they did not want to shoot against a Jew. They refused to shoot a Jew. And I think one guy went to jail for 2 weeks because he refused to shoot.
He was not the only one. There are quite a number of people.
They couldn't shoot.
They disobeyed orders. And I think that this is one of the reasons why Ben-Gurion had to call in kibbutzniks to defend the Matkal, the headquarters, the military headquarters. It's unheard of.
Right.
I think he was afraid that the army is torn apart politically, and he really, that was his great fear. And I think I would like to mention also the person who really pulled the trigger. He is currently a professor
South
of
African.
South African.
And he still
English,
has guilt over it.
Yes,
I saw that in your film.
Yeah, he is an English teacher, English literature professor at the Hebrew University, and he comes from a background. His father was the head of Beitar in South Africa, and
That's
for
a
him,
youth movement.
yes, and like the Irgun.
The
you know.
Irgun, young Irgunists.
Mhm.
And he had to pull the trigger, so
he
to
had
speak.
to pull the trigger.
And he says in your film, if there's one day I want to wipe out of my life, it's the
This
day I
is
pulled
this.
the trigger.
Yes.
Bronka, was Ben-Gurion off the wall by doing this? I mean, it's 50 years later. Can you look at it in a cool way now, or it's still emotional to you?
It is constantly the great emotion. When I heard that Altalena Affair is really made, I just couldn't wait the moment to see it. Because really it happened in our life. And everybody who knew the situation there, we went, you know, I remarried very fortunately, very happily, and I travel with my husband now.
You climbed Jacob's ladder. He wrote a book about it, right?
My
A brand new
right
book
now
coming
with
out.
so many happiness in my life that I really would like to cry, but I have to say, and I want to inject in this program, that my husband, Jacob Weintraub, just wrote a fabulous book,
Jacob's ladder.
Jacob's Ladder.
And you
And
climbed the ladder with him.
I climbed the ladder here, and he comes with me to Israel every year. And each time we meet somebody and they say, you know, my wife was married to Abraham Stavsky. They say, really? You know, when the Altalena came, I didn't want to shoot. I was in the army. We were in the Knesset to some reception, Shelansky, whoever mentioned Altalena, and they say,
Shalansky's in her film, by the way.
that's right. And
All right, let me ask you a question, Bronka. Ben-Gurion had a personal animosity and hatred towards Begin.
absolutely.
You knew Begin very well.
I knew begging
Why?
for my wedding.
All right, all right. Why,
Jabotinsky on one side.
when you married Stavsky, because you
When I
had a few
married
husbands, Bronka.
No divorces, my dear. I
I
have
know.
only tragedy.
I don't
My
want
new
any
book,
tragedy.
I'm going to compete with my husband, will be I Live Three Lives.
Be Upstairs with Jacob. That's the name of your new book.
Always.
All right.
Always.
What is...
May I just tell you about Ben-Gurion? Ben-Gurion, Golda Meir, all the so-called
labor rights.
laborites, the
Oh.
Likudniks I call them now, they had scaredness toward Menachem Begin.
Why?
He was strong, he was devoted, he was honest, he was simple. This ambition was not for himself, his ambition were always for Israel.
He lived on
Palestine.
Rosenbaum Street.
He lived in the basement like a poor man.
Did you find any evidence of this, Ilana, in your research? I know you went to UCLA, of all places, to find research on Altalena. Was there a real personal animus from Ben-Gurion towards Begin? Did you find that any place?
I think that there was an animosity in general in those days. I think that the ideological polarization in Israel at that time was something that is difficult to understand and grasp today. It's more than animosity, it's really hatred. Whether it was only Begin or Ben-Gurion, it was all through the whole...
Would Ben-Gurion
you know,
have turned over in his grave 5 times if he saw Begin signing a peace treaty with Egypt?
it's the irony of the history, I guess.
Yes, but
So, I spoke to a general who lived through that period. He told me that Begin and his crowd used to run around in brown shirts and open automobiles. Is that true? Did you find anything like that?
What?
Brown
Well,
shirts, they used to go.
Yes, there was you go back to history, and at that time, that's why I say the ideological polarization.
It was
The
unbelievable.
blue shirt was the communist socialist party,
Right.
and the brown shirt was with the, it's called fascist. I mean,
Right.
depending which side you
Israel was
were
pretty
saying.
divided at that point.
Yes,
But poor
definitely.
Begin was always poor. He never got a right shirt. When Begin came to America lately, when I was already, after Altalena long, remarried, I used to go and buy a beautiful coat for him, shirts, spoil. He says, Bronka, I don't need it, my dear. I was always happy whatever I wore.
It's true that the character of a leader is the destination of a nation.
Yes.
And I think in Altalena Affair, you can see the difference in character of two great
Well,
leaders.
in your film,
in
Ilana, let me hold you for 1
and
minute.
Menachem Begin.
It's not my nature to interrupt people, but in your film, Begin comes out very well because he is, first of all, he acknowledges that he didn't want the ship to sail, and number two, he looks for compromise, and number three, after the Altalena tragedy, he calls for reconciliation. So he comes out pretty well in your film.
Yes, but he also made a mistake, I think. The mistake was that he had to give the armament to the government as he promised.
And he didn't.
And he didn't, and the more
Because the pressure was on him
the
from
pressure
people.
was on him, and I think that here starts the problem. But it was his weakness and his greatness, really, that he asked for the people not to shoot, not to return fire.
Some story. Well, I mean, we got to do a docudrama ourselves on this thing. Bronka, I can't thank you enough for coming on. I know it's been hard and emotional for you to come on the show.
It's a privilege.
Do you forgive and forget, or you don't forget?
I never will forget Altalena, and my husbands are living with me every moment. But I thank you really that you wanted to let me share it, the feeling.
All right, we got a minute to go, and I want to ask you a few fast questions, both of you. Who funded your project, Ilana?
I studied it myself, and once I finished the rough cut, or I finished part of the shooting, I sold the rights to one of the channels, and so I covered the expenses.
Did you have any resistance from people who didn't want to talk?
No, but I resisted asking for money because I didn't want people to tell me what to do.
So you want to be objective.
I
You
wanted
don't want
to
to
be
compromise your editorial control.
Exactly.
Bronka,
Sorry you didn't ask me for the money.
well, she might now. She may make a docudrama out of
You
it.
make
Put
a
that
darling
this-
in English little cassette that my husband.
All right. Are there any books on the Altalena, Bronka?
On Altalena itself, not, but Ben Hecht.
There are
and
books?
his two-
Sorry.
Yes,
Two
they are.
books.
Go ahead.
And
What
In
are they?
Hebrew.
Quickly.
Yeah. There are two books
In
in
Hebrew?
Menachem Begin book Revolt.
No, that's
It
it,
has
about his
appeared.
life, but
Yeah.
there are
Go
specifically
ahead.
two books
I did.
about Altalena. One tells the story from the point of view of the
By whom?
Palmach, Uri Brenner, and the other one by Nakdimon tells the story
Oh yes,
the
yes,
Rerun.
yes, yes.
Nakimon's son
But-
became the
Yeah.
press attaché
Right.
or officer.
Yes.
But there
yes.
wasn't until now
Till now.
something like my documentary that didn't take sides, that tried to look at the events from a bird's eye view, impartially.
All right, Bronka, we got to leave you. We love you and leave you. Thank you
Thank you,
very
darling.
much for coming on.
I hope that you will take my husband to speak about his book one day.
Oh my God,
The
she's
lad-
plugging that book.
I love
Ilana,
it.
thank you very much. I think you've done a great service to Jewish history and Israeli history. We'll see you next week with...